Welcome to the Gap We Live In podcast, where we share life, purpose, and everything in between. Make sure you join the conversation and leave with tools to build bridges instead of burning them. I hope you get the ideas you need to make the gap smaller instead of increasing it. Because remember, whatever it is, you're not stuck. You're just in the gap. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Gap We Live In. I am your host, Gwendolyn Albright, and today is I think, one of the vulnerable episodes that I'm going to have in this season. But I think it's very, very important that we talk about this, and I hope a lot of people are going to relate. And if you don't relate to this, praise the Lord. So today we're going to talk about finding the gaps when in the unknown, especially in this day and age where a lot of things are just unknown to us, and it's just so hard for us to plan, especially for people like me that love having control and are schedule oriented. I know what's going to happen on Monday. You know where to find me on Tuesday. I know what to expect on Wednesday. But when you're in the unknown, it's very hard to realize what needs to be done. And that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. Yeah, so I'm going to share a little bit about my story. I'm sure I've shared a lot about my story, different stories as I shared in this podcast. But I've lived this season in the past 5 years. So from 2020, honestly, from 2019, I've lived in a lot of unknowns, be it in career, be it in relationships, be it in just even my relationship with God, be it in family things. And it was hard for me to figure out what would be my next best thing. And that's one of the things that I've learned while being in those unknown is that sometimes all you need to do is to find what's the next best thing to do. And I think it's Pastor Mike Cotto that said, I've heard him say one time, and I think he says it a lot, that when you don't know what to do, go to the last thing God told you to do. And that has really helped me. But sometimes you even forget what God has told you in the past. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that. And I want to focus on basically making those hard decisions. And funny enough, that's actually my dissertation, and I'm studying a lot of just how young adults navigate transitions and how they can incorporate leadership in those in making decisions in those transitions. And I want to contrast surviving in a managed environment versus thriving in a purpose-driven path. And that's what I want to encourage everybody that is listening, everybody that has tuned in, that you're going to make better decisions when you think about thriving in a purposeful, driven path, not the other way around, not let me get through today. Sometimes, yes, I understand. I've been there, trust me, where it's like, I remember especially like coming to the US when there's a lot of unknowns because it's a new country, new everything. And I remember because back home we don't have fall breaks, spring breaks, those shorter breaks. And I remember when like my first semester here in the fall and we had fall break and I didn't know where to go. I had nothing planned. I didn't even know there was a fall break. And I remember, and I think the cafeteria closed during that time, and I didn't have money. Luckily, I went to school in that semester with my brother, so I could lean on him sometimes. But because I was also a go-getter, I'm like, I need to figure it out. And I remember the day before I took apples from the cafeteria, and that's what I ate for like 2 days. And that was bad. Like I wish I had given myself permission to ask more questions, or maybe ask a friend about what they're gonna do in the fall break. And because they were other international students there, and they had activities like the ones that were not freshmen at the time. They've seen the fall break before, but I went and I struggled during those few days. I believe it was like a weekend. Yeah. Now that I'm out of college, I've forgotten all about that. But that was a traumatic time where I struggled, and somebody could have helped. So I want this to be a space for you to remember, if you are in a gap and you are in an unknown because you've never done it before, because it has never been part of your schedule. Please, please, please don't stay there. Please, please, please. There is somebody out there. Even me, like, just DM me. I'm not promising the world or anything, but I just don't want you to die in the gap, because we live in the gap, and we know that it takes a village. I'm gonna always say it. It really takes a village. So yeah, surviving in a managed environment, it's not really for us. We're not meant to do that. We're meant to thrive. You are meant to thrive. If I'm the only person who's ever told you that, let me be that person to encourage you and say, you are not meant to live in that closed enclosure waiting for your last day. Please, please, please. Somebody out there is longing for a friend like you. Somebody out there is longing for a partner like you. Go out and maybe go to a park, and maybe a child is looking for somebody to answer one question and connect, mentor, do something. Do not stay where you're at to just die. Try to make it an opportunity. I'm gonna always say it especially in this season, because I want people to understand that us living in the gap is not a death sentence. It's actually not. It's an opportunity. Honestly, it's an opportunity. And trust me, I've been there. I'm still there. I'm still figuring out a lot about my life as a new mom, as a new wife. I consider myself as a new wife, which I feel like I'm gonna always feel like that for the longest. But and then another thing is when there's hard decisions to make, especially when you've been in the gap for so long. So I'm speaking to those people that finally has found out that they've been a gap in, you name it, whatever it is, and you have no idea what it would look like or the next step. I want to encourage you, and I want to give you permission, if you would let me, to step away. Step away, think about it, journal. I remember there's this one time that, it was about me deciding to quit my job. And it was so many things going in my head, just thinking like, oh my gosh, if I do this, what I'm doing, then this, then this. And then I talked to a friend of mine about it. She's amazing. I love her. And she was like, why don't you just write it down? Why don't you just write cons and pros, quitting your job or not? And then you'll have a conversation with your husband, and it would make more sense. I am telling you, I did that, and everything just became so clear. I just needed that one voice that acknowledges that it's a struggle, but also give me just a tip. But have I not had shared that, I would have just, stayed where I'm at or where I was. And who knows, just be unfulfilled and be overlooked and under, all the things that I was living in that job. But I took some time. I took pen or paper, and actually the Bible does say, write it down, put the vision down. And when I interpret that, or how I guess I've learned it throughout my life, is it's not just not only what God tells you, but it's also what are those thoughts that are coming up, because that could be a glimpse of something that the Holy Spirit is sharing. But if you don't catch it and write it down, then it's going to slip away. Of course, God is an amazing God, and He's so gracious, and He tends to bring those back up, the ones that are necessary for your life journey. But take hold of those. And then there's also on the negative side too, the Bible does say, take hold of those captive, take hold captive of your thoughts. And sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes when you are in that gap and all the voices you're hearing is negative voices, and basically you're hearing, I told you so, this person had all the doubts and all the, I don't know about you, but I've so many times that I've found myself reminiscing just negative thoughts. And praise the Lord that now I know to take hold of them. And sometimes I voice it, of course, to a safe person, and which usually now is my husband. And my husband always is, yeah, that's a lie. And he calls them how they are. And now we've tried this thing of, we heard it from a pastor friend as well, where when he feels sick, like even if it's like a headache, he doesn't say I have a headache. He says I am hearing this lie. I'm hearing this lie that I have a headache. And then when it becomes a lie, it does fade away. Trust me, try it. Try it. I mean, try it. I'm not saying when you have a headache or when you feel, bad symptoms in your body, just call them a lie all the time. But sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's really your body saying, I'm just not in the right place, and you need to remember what truth says. What does truth say about you? And I remember, I know there's a lot of time, especially when I was in those seasons of finding out that I didn't know who I am, and I was living my life out of hurt. So which what that meant was everybody I met, I was hurting them without realizing it, without noticing, so I would bring like the joy that I normally does, but then every time they would get closer, somehow I would hurt them, be it in words, be it in I don't know. Of course, it was different every time, but I want to encourage you and say you are meant to live in purpose. You're meant to live in good soil. While you're planted and you are watered and all of those things, but that you need to notice the gap, step away, have the courage to step away. I think I've said it before. I don't remember if I've said it on this podcast yet, but there is this one time that I had a big decision. I think I did. I don't remember which episode I said this, but I'm going to say it again. I was going to make a huge decision, and I talked to my pastor about it. I was like, I don't know what to do, blah, blah. And then he's like, I think you do. It's like, you do know what to. And I was like, I'm not sure. This is why I've kind of talked to you. And then he said, well, when your heart is free, have the courage to follow it. And I'm not saying everything that your heart, because the heart is deceitful above all else. But when your heart is free, because freedom comes from Jesus, because who the Son sets free is free indeed. So when your heart is free, you have to have the courage to follow it. And it was such an eye-opening statement for me because I knew where my heart was free. I knew, there was no doubt. So if you don't know where your heart is free yet, take time, give yourself space, and you will figure it out. You will figure it out. And if you don't figure out today, try again tomorrow. Talk to somebody else tomorrow or the next day until you know where your heart is free. There's so many resources. There is so many, and I want to be able to be giving you resources on this podcast, but it depends on what you're going through. One book that comes to mind, and I'm gonna put it on in the description, that comes to mind is a book called how do we measure your life, how you measure your life. I don't remember the author, but I'm gonna put it in the description so you can look into it. How do you measure your life? And then another one that helped me actually specifically in this season where I had to make huge decisions, especially this is mostly for young adults, is the emerging. Oh, I'm gonna have to put it on the comment in the description about that book. It basically talks about how the 20s are your best years, where you are making decisions that are going to project you in the life that you want or you desire. And it's called The Defining Decade. I'm so glad I remember it. It's called The Defining Decade. A friend of mine, she told me about it and I read it and it changed my 20s. I read it when I was 23, 22, 23. If I remember correctly, I think I was 22. Yeah, I was 22. And I was like, I am so glad I read it at 22. But if you're not 22, you still should read it. If you are 29, you should absolutely still read it. If you're 30, you probably should read it too, because it's going to give you a lot of insight on things that you can do to project you in the best, help you, I guess, make huge decisions, because it just talks about just core things that we overlook when you're in our 20s, because we think we have time and we think, I have a couple of years to live, but which you do, you absolutely do. However, the foundation is key. I have all these conversations with my husband and my friends these days. I am in such a time that foundation is key, especially for my family. Now that we're having, children, and we're figuring out what our family will look like, how we're gonna raise these children, foundation is key, because that's where you're not leaving gaps. But it also helps to have these conversations and listening to people that have lived in gaps, because then you know what kind of brick or what kind of bridge you need to make sure you put in, perspective or in the plans, so you don't have that gap. Yeah. And another thing that I want to share is naming the gaps and focusing on bridging them. So sometimes we forget to name them and make it a project. Literally make it a project and find. I would like pick 2 people, not 3, because that's a lot of people. And then I would tell them I'm working on this. And it's so helpful when they would come back and say, how is that going now? And it would kind of like keep me in check and keep me accountable in, how is it going? And so one of the projects that I was working on in the past years, I still feel I'm still working on it, but that it's a continuation, because it never ends. It's the project of the business of love. It sounds cliche, or you call it whatever you think, but I don't remember where I heard it, where that person, I think it was in a sermon or a conference or something, and they said Christians were in the business of love. So when we need to check ourselves, we need to ask ourselves, how is business going? So how is the business of love going? And that's so huge. I mean, as Christians, God is love, and the business of love it was not going good in your life, then there is a huge problem. There is a huge problem. If you are having love issues with your mom, that's a huge problem. If you're having love issues with your sibling, with your friend, with your coworker, with name your neighbor, there is a problem, because we are in the business of love. Think about it. If you had a business of selling cars and none of them has been sold for a month, you would not be sleeping at night. You would be looking into what's really going on. But how many times do we think about how we've loved somebody? How have you loved somebody today? Have you, you know, smiled at somebody to make their day today? And sometimes it's also just loving yourself. Have you loved yourself today? Have you, put, there's one time that I used to struggle putting lip gloss on my lips, and that was not good for my lips because they need moisture, especially in like the winter when it's like so dry. And now I live in Denver, so it's like so dry. And I remember my friend, always when I would like get in her car, she's like, oh my goodness, she would like give me lip gloss. And then one day she's like so angry at me. All of a sudden she's like, I put your lip gloss. You need to learn to love yourself. Like, do you not even love yourself? Like your lips are so chopped, and I was like, that's so true. My lips are struggling. I don't care. And sometimes we overlook just that small piece of loving ourselves, and it's so bad. It's not good. It's really not, because I was uncomfortable and I didn't look good. By just remembering to love ourselves, it changes a lot. So that's another thing I want to leave with you today. How have you loved yourself today? How have you loved your neighbor today? Have you and then that, without you realizing it, will help you notice the gaps that you might be living in. Because when you think about, I haven't talked to my dad in a month, and you usually do, then the business of love in that area might be struggling, and you need to do something. You need to do some research. You need to talk to dads. When I was working on my relationship with my father, I read so many books. Still am. And when I was going to get married, I read so many books about marriage, about relationship in general. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, oh my gosh, my library changed. Because now my business of love changed, because I need to learn about pregnancy, I need to learn about labor and delivery and all of that. So that's learning how to love yourself. And that, I promise you, will help you realize a few gaps that you might be living in. But again, those gaps are meant to give you that opportunity for you to get out of those gaps by building bridges instead of burning them. And making them smaller, making those gaps smaller instead of increasing them. So I could say a lot of things about this, but I want to just emphasize that when you're in the unknown, there is a few things that are still core to still being human. And one of them is how is your business, how is the business of love going in your life? And another thing is, how am I taking space and time to just reflect and sit down and make sure that the decision that I am making, I'm not making it out of hurt, but in purpose and in healing, and giving yourself grace in that season. So again, this podcast is about giving you that space and giving you permission to have those conversations. If it takes you to just write something in the comments so that somebody else sees it and can relate and can give you advice, please do so. But please, please, please notice the gap we live in, but don't stay there. It is an opportunity for you to live better and brighter and be the gift to the world that you are. So I'll leave this all with you. I hope this was very encouraging. I'll see you in the next episode. See you then.